When down on her luck, Hannah takes a job caring for chickens on a mysterious estate. She never expects the gruff farmer to be a reclusive millionaire, or that her family's legacy lies hidden in the very soil beneath her feet. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windshield of Hannah Bell's ancient sedan as she squinted at the hand-drawn map. She was lost again. Story of her life. At 35, she should have been settled somewhere with a nice house and maybe even a family. Instead, she was chasing yet another job in yet another small town, her few possessions crammed in the back seat. "You can do this," she muttered, pushing a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. "It's just chickens, how hard can it be?" The sign for Larkspur Hollow appeared suddenly, weather-beaten and half-hidden by overgrown branches. Hannah turned onto the gravel drive, her car rattling in protest. As the driveway curved, her mouth fell open. This wasn't a farm. This was an estate. A sprawling white farmhouse stood proudly on a gentle hill, surrounded by well-tended gardens and picturesque outbuildings. In the distance, she could see rows of what looked like organic crops, and closer by, several modern chicken coops that seemed both practical and oddly stylish. Hannah checked the job listing on her phone one more time. Chicken caretaker wanted. Room provided. Experience preferred but not necessary. Nothing about working for what looked like a millionaire. She was already 15 minutes late for the interview, and now she felt even more out of place in her faded jeans and waitress-scented blouse. Still, she couldn't afford to turn back. The diner in the last town had closed. Her divorce had left her with nothing but debt, and this job offered housing, a tiny miracle she desperately needed. Hannah parked. A tall man in well-worn work clothes emerged from one of the barns. He had a full beard touched with silver, and even from a distance his presence commanded attention. "You must be here about the chickens," he said, his voice deep and gravelly from disuse. "Yes, I'm Hannah Bell. I'm so sorry I'm late. The directions were complicated," he finished for her. "Most folks get lost the first time." He didn't offer his name or a smile, just gestured for her to follow him. Hannah scrambled to grab her wrinkled resume from the passenger seat and hurried after him, her sneakers slipping slightly in the morning dew. "I've worked on a farm before," she said, trying to fill the silence. "Well, my grandparents had a few chickens and I helped during summers." The man grunted in response, leading her to the coops where dozens of healthy-looking hens clucked contentedly. They need feeding twice daily. Fresh water. Eggs collected each morning. Coops cleaned weekly. "Think you can handle that?" His eyes, a stormy blue-gray, finally met hers. Hannah stood taller. "Yes, I'm a hard worker. I learn fast." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, at her directness. "The cottage is there." He pointed to a small stone building near a stream. "It's simple but clean. Job pays weekly, comes with the room and produce from the garden." Hannah's heart leapt. It was more than she'd hoped for. "When would you need me to start?" she asked. "Yesterday," he said, but the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "I can start today," Hannah replied quickly. The man nodded, then turned to leave. "Wait," Hannah called after him. "Who should I report to? Are you the farm manager?" He paused, looking back with an unreadable expression. "Something like that. Cottage key is under the pot of geraniums. Get settled in." And with that, he disappeared around the barn. The cottage exceeded Hannah's expectations. Though tiny, it had clearly been renovated recently. The kitchen was small but modern, the bathroom new, and the single bedroom cozy with a handmade quilt on the bed. By evening, she had unpacked her meager belongings and was sitting on the front step, watching the sunset paint the hills in gold. For the first time in years, Hannah felt something like peace. A knock at the side of the cottage startled her. It was the bearded man from earlier, holding a basket. "Thought you might need provisions," he said, holding it out awkwardly. Inside, Hannah found fresh bread, cheese, eggs, and jars of honey and preserves. "Thank you," she said, genuinely touched. "This is very kind. I'm Hannah, by the way, but I already told you that." She felt herself blushing. "Bo," he replied simply. "Well, thank you, Bo. I appreciate it." He nodded, turning to leave, then stopped. There's coffee in the main house kitchen if you want some before you start. Tomorrow, 5:30. Hannah's eyes widened. In the morning? Chickens don't sleep in, he said, and this time she definitely caught the ghost of a smile before he walked away. The next morning came too soon. Hannah dragged herself out of bed. At 5, threw on clean clothes and made her way to the main house. She'd worked early shifts at diners for years, but 5:30 still felt criminal. The kitchen light was on, warm and inviting against the pre-dawn darkness. Hannah knocked tentatively before pushing the door open. Bo stood at a large farmhouse stove, his back to her. He turned at the sound, coffee pot in hand. "Morning," he said, pouring her a cup without asking. "Thanks." Hannah wrapped her hands around the warm mug, noticing for the first time how his eyes matched the steely blue of early dawn. "So, chickens first." Bo nodded, sipping his own coffee. "I'll show you the routine." They walked together to the coops, shoulders brushing occasionally in the narrow paths. The rooster crowed, announcing their arrival. "Ladies first," Bo said, handing Hannah a bag of organic feed. "They like a handful scattered in each section, then we refresh the water." Hannah followed his instructions, surprised by how gentle this gruff man was with the birds. One hen in particular, with striking black and white feathers, seemed to recognize him, clucking happily and following his movements. "That's Duchess," Bo explained, noticing Hannah's amused expression. "She thinks she runs the place." "Doesn't she?" Hannah asked, and was rewarded with a real chuckle from Bo. "Don't tell the others," he said conspiratorially. They worked in comfortable silence, collecting eggs and checking on each chicken. Hannah found herself relaxing, falling into the rhythm of the tasks. There was something soothing about the simplicity of it all. "You're good with them," Bo observed as they finished up. "They're easy to please," Hannah replied. "Food, water, clean home, a little attention, not complicated." "Unlike people," Bo said quietly, more to himself than to her. Hannah glanced at him, curious. "Is it just you working this whole place?" "I have seasonal help for the crops. Maintenance guy comes twice weekly, but day to day it's mainly me." "It's beautiful," Hannah said sincerely. "You've done an amazing job with the farm." Something shifted in Bo's expression. He cleared his throat. "You should meet Mrs. Potts. She comes to clean the main house and cook a few meals each week. She'll show you where everything is in the garden when you want vegetables." Hannah nodded, sensing he was uncomfortable with her compliment. "I'll look forward to meeting her." As they walked back toward the house, Hannah noticed a sleek black car coming up the driveway. Bo stiffened beside her. "You can head back to your cottage," he said, his voice suddenly formal. "I'll see you tomorrow morning." Before Hannah could respond, he was striding toward the arriving car. His entire demeanor changed. Curious, she lingered by the garden shed, watching as a tall, impeccably dressed man stepped out of the vehicle. The stranger clapped Bo on the shoulder with familiar ease, but Bo's body language remained rigid. Hannah couldn't hear their conversation, but she could feel the tension from where she stood. When the visitor handed Bo what looked like documents, Bo's head shook firmly. Not wanting to be caught spying, Hannah slipped back to her cottage, questions spinning in her mind. Who was her mysterious boss, really? And why did he seem to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders? Days passed, falling into a pleasant routine. Hannah learned the rhythms of farm life, finding unexpected joy in the simple tasks. Each morning, Bo would meet her with coffee and they would tend to the chickens together before parting ways for the rest of the day. Sometimes she wouldn't see him again until the next morning. Other times, she'd spot him in the fields, working, alongside the few farmhands, or fixing machinery in one of the barns. Always busy, always alone. A week into her stay, Hannah met Mrs. Potts, a cheerful woman in her 60s, who came 3 times weekly to manage the main house. "So you're the chicken girl," Mrs. Potts said, smiling warmly as she kneaded bread dough in the kitchen. "About time we had another woman around here. This place needs a feminine touch." "It's beautiful already," Hannah said, helping herself to coffee. "I still can't believe I get to live here." Mrs. Potts gave her a knowing look. "And what do you think of our Mr. Lark?" "Lark, as in Larkspur Hollow?" Hannah asked, confused. "Bo Lark, the owner," Mrs. Potts explained, her flour-dusted hands pausing. "He didn't tell you?" Hannah nearly dropped her mug. "The owner?" I thought he was the farm manager or something. Mrs. Potts laughed heartily. Oh, honey, that man owns all of this and then some. Bo Lark is one of the most successful organic farmers in the state. Revolutionized the industry, they say. Hannah felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment. But he works in the fields. He feeds chickens. That's Bo for you, Mrs. Potts said, shaping the dough into a loaf. Never could stand being behind a key. Desk loves this land more than anything. Hannah's mind raced, recalling her informal interview, her casual conversation with Bo. Why wouldn't he tell me? He's a private man, Mrs. Potts said, her expression softening. Been through a lot. Lost his parents young, built this business from scratch, then had some... She paused, choosing her words carefully. Disappointments. Now he keeps to himself. Lets folks think what they want. What kind of disappointments? Hannah asked before. She could stop herself. Mrs. Potts gave her a gentle smile. Not my story to tell, dear, but if you stick around, you might learn for yourself. Bo doesn't trust easy, but he's a good man with a good heart. The sound of boots on the porch ended. Their conversation. Bo entered, stopping short when he saw them together. Mrs. Potts, he nodded. Hannah. I was just telling Hannah about your prize heirloom tomatoes, Mrs. Potts covered smoothly. Thought she might like to try some. Bo's eyes moved between them, clearly suspicious of their interrupted conversation. The Cherokee purples are ripe in the south garden, he said finally. Help yourself, Hannah. Thank you, she replied, unable to meet his gaze now that she knew he was her actual boss. I should get back to Mule. The chickens need their midday check. She hurried out, feeling Bo's eyes on her back as she left. That evening, Hannah sat on her cottage steps, watching fireflies begin to appear in the gathering dusk. Her mind kept returning to the revelation about Bo. It explained so much. The quality of everything on the farm, the visiting businessman, the way he carried himself with quiet authority. But it made her feel like a fool. And worse, it made her question why a millionaire farmer would bother spending his mornings showing a novice like her how to care for chickens. The crunch of footsteps drew her attention. Bo approached through the twilight, his tall figure silhouetted against the evening sky. Mrs. Potts told me what she revealed, he said without preamble, stopping a few feet from her steps. Hannah stood, crossing her arms defensively. Why didn't you tell me you own this place? Would it have mattered? Of course it would have, she said, flustered. I would have been more formal. Less yourself, Bo challenged. Is that better? Hannah fell silent, considering his words. People change when they know, he continued quietly. They want something or they put on an act. I prefer honesty. Then be honest with me, Hannah countered. Why did you hire me? My resume was a disaster. I was late and I knew almost nothing about commercial chicken farming. Bo looked away, focusing on the distant hills. For a moment, Hannah thought he wouldn't answer. Your voice, he finally said. When you spoke about needing a fresh start, it was honest, real. He shrugged, clearly uncomfortable with the admission. Hannah didn't know how to respond. The simple truth of his words touched something deep inside her. I'm sorry if Mrs. Potts made you uncomfortable, Bo continued. If you want to leave... I don't, Hannah interrupted quickly. I like it here. The chickens, the cottage. It's the most peaceful place I've been in a long time. Bo studied her face in the fading light, as if looking for confirmation of her sincerity. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him. Good, he said simply. They stood in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with unspoken thoughts. If you were to dream again, Bo asked suddenly, what would it be, if you could do anything? The question caught Hannah off guard. Dream? You mentioned needing a fresh start. But what would you want beyond just stability? Hannah hadn't allowed herself to dream in so long that the question felt almost painful. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe a place that feels like home, work that matters, people who see me for who I really am. The vulnerability in her answer hung in the air between them. Not so impossible, Bo said softly. Hannah looked up at him, really seeing him for perhaps the first time, not as the gruff farm manager or the wealthy owner, but as a man who understood loss and hope in equal measure. What about you? She dared to ask. What's your dream now? Beau's expression changed, a mixture of surprise and something else she couldn't name. Before he could answer, the sound of a car engine broke the moment. Headlights swept across them as a vehicle pulled up to the main house. "I should go," Beau said, his walls visibly rebuilding. "Early start tomorrow." Hannah watched him walk away, feeling as though something important had just happened between them and had been interrupted at a crucial moment. Curious, she moved to where she could see the main house. A slender woman in an expensive-looking dress was emerging from a sports car. Even in the dim light, Hannah could tell she was beautiful in a polished, perfect way. The woman embraced Beau, who stood stiffly in her arms. Something twisted in Hannah's stomach at the sight. "Not your business," she told herself firmly, retreating into her cottage. "Not your business at all." But as she prepared for bed, Hannah couldn't shake the feeling that her peaceful new life at Larkspur Hollow had just become a lot more complicated. The woman who emerged from the sports car was everything Hannah was not. Tall, blonde, and dressed in clothes that probably cost more than Hannah's entire wardrobe, she moved with the confidence of someone who had never worried about paying rent. From her cottage window, Hannah watched as the woman linked her arm through Beau's and practically dragged him into the main house. The lights in his study stayed on late into the night, silhouettes occasionally visible through the curtains. "Not your business," Hannah reminded herself again the next morning as she pulled on her work clothes. But curiosity gnawed at her. When she arrived at the main house for coffee, the kitchen was empty. No Beau, no coffee waiting. Hannah hesitated, then decided to make it herself. She was pouring a cup when Mrs. Potts bustled in, looking flustered. "Oh, you're here, good," the older woman said. "Mr. Lark asked me to tell you he can't make the morning rounds today. He has a guest." "I saw," Hannah said before she could stop herself. Mrs. Potts gave her a knowing look. "That would be Vivian Carter, the ex-fiancée." Hannah nearly choked on her coffee. "Fiancé? Ex," Mrs. Potts emphasized, though not for lack of trying on her part. "She's been showing up more frequently these past few months, always with some new business proposal." She lowered her voice. "Between you and me, that woman never loved Beau. Just his potential." Hannah absorbed this information, telling herself she shouldn't care. She barely knew Beau. He was her employer, nothing more. "I'd better go tend the chickens," she said, trying to sound casual. "Take these with you." Mrs. Potts handed her a basket of blueberry muffins, fresh from the oven. "No sense you missing breakfast because of that woman." Hannah smiled gratefully and headed out to the coops. The morning was beautiful, sunlight dappling through the trees, but her mood had soured. She fed the chickens methodically, not talking to them as she usually did. "They'll take it personally if you ignore them." Beau's voice startled her. He stood at the entrance to the coop, looking tired but with a faint smile on his lips. He'd changed into clean work clothes, but his hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. "I thought you were busy," Hannah said. More sharply than intended. "I made time." He entered the coop and took the feed bag from her. Their fingers brushed momentarily, sending an unwelcome tingle up Hannah's arm. "Your guest won't mind?" she asked. Beau's eyes met hers, searching. "Vivian is used to entertaining herself." They worked in silence for a few minutes, the chickens clucking happily around them. Finally, Hannah's curiosity got the better of her. "Mrs. Potts said she's your ex-fiancée." Beau sighed. "Mrs. Potts talks too much." "She cares about you," Hannah said simply. This seemed to catch him off guard. He paused, watching Duchess peck at the ground near his feet. "Vivian and I were engaged 3 years ago," he said finally. "It didn't work out. Yet she's still around," Hannah observed. "She has business interests in the farm, or thinks she does." His tone made it clear he didn't want to elaborate. Hannah nodded, accepting the boundary. "Well, the chickens don't care about your complicated love life, they just want their breakfast." Unexpectedly, Beau laughed, a real laugh that transformed his face and made the corners of his eyes crinkle. "Is that what you think I have? A complicated love life?" The genuine amusement in his voice made Hannah smile despite herself. "I don't know what you have, Mr. Lark. You're still a mystery to me." "Beau," he corrected softly. "Just Beau." Their eyes met, and for a moment, something warm and unfamiliar filled the space between them. "Beau," A voice shattered the moment. Vivian stood at the edge of the chicken yard, her designer shoes clearly unsuited for farm life. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Her gaze shifted to Hannah, assessing and dismissive in a single glance. "This must be the new girl Mrs. Potts mentioned." Her tone suggested help rather than employee. Hannah straightened, suddenly aware of her worn jeans and messy hair. "Hannah Bell," she said, extending a feed-dusted hand. Vivian ignored the gesture. "Beau, we need to finish our discussion. The investors won't wait forever." Something hardened in Beau's expression. "I think I made myself clear last night, Vivian." "Don't be stubborn," Vivian said with forced lightness. "This is a multi-million-dollar opportunity. At least look at the revised proposal." Hannah began backing away. "I'll check the water troughs," she mumbled, giving them privacy. As she walked to the far side of the coop, she could hear their voices rising and falling. Vivian's insistent, Beau's increasingly firm. When Hannah glanced back, Vivian had her hand on Beau's arm, her face close to his. Hannah busied herself with the chickens, ignoring the uncomfortable feeling in her chest. It wasn't jealousy, she told herself. How could it be? She'd only known Beau for a couple of weeks, but when she looked up again and saw them walking back to the house together, Vivian's hand tucked possessively in the crook of Beau's arm, Hannah couldn't deny the sinking feeling in her stomach. Days passed, and Vivian showed no signs of leaving. She'd taken over the guest suite in the main house, according to Mrs. Potts, and had a constant stream of visitors, men in expensive suits carrying briefcases and tablets. Beau still met Hannah for morning rounds, but he seemed distracted, the easy rhythm they'd established now interrupted by frequent calls on his cell phone. "Sorry," he'd mutter, stepping away to take yet another call. Hannah tried not to let it bother her. After all, he was a successful businessman. That he'd spent any time at all helping her with chickens was probably unusual. Now he was simply returning to his normal life, a life that clearly had no place for a divorced waitress with dirt under her fingernails. One morning, Hannah arrived at the main house to find not Beau but Vivian in the kitchen, perfectly made up despite the early hour, typing rapidly on a sleek laptop. "Oh," Vivian looked up briefly. "Beau's on a call with Tokyo. He said to tell you he can't make it this morning." Hannah nodded stiffly, turning to leave. "He works too hard, you know," Vivian continued, stopping Hannah at the door. "Always has. That's why this expansion would be good for him. Let other people take on some of the burden." "Expansion?" Hannah couldn't help asking. Vivian smiled, a calculated expression that didn't reach her eyes. "Larkspur Organics is going international. We're bringing in partners to scale the operation. Beau won't have to waste his time on mundane tasks anymore." The implication was clear. Feeding chickens with Hannah was one of those mundane tasks. "Beau loves this farm," Hannah said, surprising herself with her defensive tone. "He doesn't consider any of it a waste of time." "That's charming," Vivian replied condescendingly. "But Beau knows better than anyone that businesses either grow or die. And in case you haven't noticed, he's been coming around to my way of thinking. Why else would he be spending so much time in meetings?" Hannah had no answer for that. It was true, Beau had been increasingly absent, caught up in whatever Vivian and her business associates were proposing. "Well, the chickens are waiting," she said finally, turning to leave. "Hannah," Vivian called after her, "you seem like a nice person. Some advice? Don't get too comfortable here. Things are changing." The warning followed Hannah like a shadow as she went about her morning chores. That evening, a soft knock at her cottage door surprised Hannah. She opened it to find Beau standing there, looking exhausted. "Sorry about this morning," he said without preamble. "It's fine. I managed." Hannah stepped back, hesitantly inviting him in. Beau entered, seeming too large for the tiny cottage. He glanced around, taking in the small touches Hannah had added. Wildflowers in a mason jar, a quilt draped over the couch, books stacked on the coffee table. "You've made it your own," he observed. "I hope that's okay," Hannah said, suddenly nervous. "It's good. It should be lived in." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Hannah now recognized as a sign of stress. "I came to apologize for Vivian. Mrs. Potts mentioned she was unwelcoming." Hannah shrugged. She's protecting her interests. I understand. Her interests? Bo looked genuinely confused. The business, the expansion. Hannah moved to the kitchen, filling the kettle to make tea. She explained about the international plans. Bo's expression darkened. Did she now? It sounds like a big opportunity, Hannah said carefully, setting out 2 mugs. It's not what I want, Bo said firmly. Never has been. Hannah turned to face him. Then why are all those business people here? Why are you in meetings all day? Because sometimes you have to hear people out to prove you've considered all options, he replied. Because Vivian brought investors all the way from New York, and I owed her the courtesy of listening. He sighed heavily. And because part of me wondered if maybe I was being stubborn for no good reason. Were you? Hannah asked softly. Bo's eyes met hers, clear and certain. No, I built Larkspur to be what it is, human-scaled, connected to the community, sustainable. Their vision would turn it into something I wouldn't recognize. Relief washed over Hannah, though she tried not to show it. Have you told Vivian? I'm telling them all tomorrow, he said. Final answer is no, then they'll leave. The kettle whistled, and Hannah busied herself making tea to hide her smile. What made you decide? She asked, handing him a steaming mug. Bo accepted it, his fingers brushing hers. This morning, when I missed our rounds, I realized I'd rather be feeding chickens with you than sitting in a boardroom discussing profit projections. He looked almost embarrassed by the admission. Hannah's heart skipped a beat. The chickens prefer you to me anyway, she said lightly, especially Duchess. It's not just the chickens, Bo said quietly, his eyes not leaving hers. The air between them seemed to charge with electricity. Hannah became acutely aware of how close they were standing in the small kitchen, of the way Bo's presence filled the room. Bo, The harsh ring of his cell phone cut her off. Bo closed his eyes briefly in frustration before answering. Yes, Vivian, he said, his voice tight. No, it can't wait until morning. Fine, I'll be right there. He hung up, looking apologetically at Hannah. Crisis with one of the investors, I have to go. Hannah nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. Of course. At the door, Bo paused. What were you going to say? Before the phone rang, Hannah shook her head. Nothing important. Go deal with your investors. Bo looked like he wanted to argue, but another call lit up his phone screen. With a last apologetic glance, he hurried back toward the main house. Hannah watched him go, the half-finished conversation hanging in the air like the last note of a song. The next morning dawned clear and beautiful. Hannah was up early, eager to hear how Bo's meeting had gone. She hoped to find him waiting with coffee as usual, but the kitchen was empty when she arrived. Mrs. Potts appeared a few minutes later, her normally cheerful face drawn with worry. Everything okay? Hannah asked. The older woman sighed. There was quite the commotion last night. Raised voices, doors slamming. I've never seen Mr. Lark so angry. What happened? I'm not entirely sure, but Ms. Carter's car is still here and those business folks are all gathered in the dining room looking like they're planning for war. Hannah frowned. Bo said he was going to tell them no yesterday. Well, something changed, Mrs. Potts said grimly. And whatever it was, it's not. Good. Hannah went about her morning chores distracted, watching the main house for any sign of Bo. Around mid-morning, the parade of business people finally emerged, climbing into their various luxury vehicles. Vivian stood on the porch, shaking hands with each of them, a triumphant smile on her perfect face. When the last car pulled away, Vivian turned and caught Hannah watching. Her smile widened as she waved, the gesture somehow both friendly and threatening at once. Hannah's stomach twisted. Something was very wrong. She waited until Vivian went back inside before approaching the main house. The kitchen door was unlocked, as usual, but the house felt different, tense and silent. Bo? She called softly. No answer. Hannah moved through the house, eventually hearing muffled voices from Bo's study. The door was ajar, and through the crack, she could see Bo standing by the window, his back rigid. Vivian sat perched on the edge of his desk, looking immensely pleased with herself. It's the right decision, Bo, she was saying. You know it is. The farm will thrive under professional management, and you'll be free to focus on the bigger picture. We'll have the life we always planned. You planned, Beau corrected, his voice tight with anger. I never wanted this, Vivian, any of it. I made that clear years ago. Yet here we are, Vivian said smugly. The contracts are signed, the investors are on board, and you and I are finally back where we belong, together, building an empire. Hannah backed away from the door, her heart pounding. Contracts signed? But Beau had said he was going to reject the deal. She retreated to the kitchen, trying to make sense of what she'd heard. Had Beau changed his mind? Was he really rekindling his relationship with Vivian? Had everything he'd said to Hannah last night been a lie? He wouldn't, she whispered to herself. He wouldn't. But doubt crept in, cold and insidious. She'd known. Beau for barely a month. Vivian had history with him, connections, a shared vision of success. What did Hannah have to offer that could possibly compete? The sound of approaching footsteps made her straighten. Vivian swept into the kitchen, stopping. Short when she saw Hannah. Oh, eavesdropping, were we? Her tone was light, but her eyes were hard. I was looking for Beau, Hannah said, refusing to be intimidated. He's rather busy, Vivian replied, opening the refrigerator and helping herself to a bottle of water. But I can pass along a message. I'll wait and speak to him myself, Hannah said firmly. Vivian sighed dramatically. Look, Hannah, you seem like a sweet girl, so let me be straight with you. Beau has signed the agreements. Larkspur is going to change dramatically over the next few months, and many positions will be redundant. Including chicken caretaker, Hannah asked, already knowing the answer. We'll be automating most of the small-scale operations, Vivian confirmed, not even trying to sound sympathetic. But I'm sure Beau will give you an excellent reference. Hannah felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her, just when she'd started to feel at home, to imagine a future here. Why? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would he agree to this when he told me last night he was going to reject it? Something flashed across Vivian's perfect features. Surprise, then calculation. You two had quite the heart-to-heart, did you? How interesting. She set down her water bottle and stepped closer to Hannah. Perhaps he didn't tell you everything. Like the fact that his mother's medical bills nearly bankrupted him 10 years ago, or that the only reason Larkspur Hollow survived was because my father loaned him the money to save it. Hannah stared at her in shock. Yes, Vivian continued, clearly enjoying Hannah's reaction. Beau has been in debt to my family for a decade. Part of our agreement when we got engaged was that the debt would be forgiven. When he broke things off, well, my father was very disappointed. The terms became less favorable. You're blackmailing him, Hannah said, the pieces falling into place. Vivian laughed. Such a dramatic word. I'm simply reminding Beau of his obligations. The debt comes due next month. Without this deal, he loses everything, the farm, the business, all of it. He could get a loan from a bank, Hannah argued. In this economy? For a farm? Please, Vivian scoffed. Our investors are his only option, and they'll only commit if I'm involved to oversee their interests. She leaned closer. Face it, Hannah. You were a pleasant distraction for him, nothing more. Beau and I have history, we have a future. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Hannah felt sick. Was Vivian telling the truth? It would explain why Beau had suddenly reversed his decision. If he was facing financial ruin, I want to hear it from him, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. He's making calls to Tokyo, Vivian replied, smoothly. Very important calls, but I'll tell him you stopped by. Her smile was pure venom. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a celebratory lunch to prepare. Hannah left the house in a daze, her mind spinning. Everything had changed in the space of a morning. Her job, her home, whatever had been growing between her and Beau, all of it suddenly in jeopardy. As she walked back to her cottage, Hannah made a decision. She wouldn't wait around to be dismissed. She wouldn't watch as Vivian took everything. Beau had built and turned it into something cold and commercial, and she definitely wouldn't stay to witness Beau and Vivian reunite, playing out some twisted version of happily ever after. With tears threatening to spill, Hannah began to pack her meager belongings. It was time to move on. Again. The sun was setting as Hannah placed her small suitcase by the cottage door. She'd packed quickly, keeping only what would fit in her car. It hurt to leave the cozy space that had begun to feel like home, but staying would hurt more. She sat at the kitchen table, penning a brief note to Beau. She'd tried to keep it simple, thanking him for the opportunity, wishing him well with the farm's expansion, explaining that she thought it best to move on now rather than later. No mention of her feelings, no accusation about his deception, just a clean break. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Hannah quickly wiped away a tear before opening the door. Mrs. Potts stood there, concern evident on her kind face. "I saw your car packed up," she said without preamble. "You're leaving." Hannah nodded, unable to trust her voice. "Because of what that woman said?" Mrs. Potts asked, her tone sharper than Hannah had ever heard it. "You know?" "I know Vivian Carter is a manipulative snake," Mrs. Potts said firmly. "And I know you shouldn't believe a word she says without checking with Beau first. She said he signed the contracts," Hannah explained, "that they're expanding the farm, automating operations, that my job will be eliminated." Mrs. Potts snorted, in disbelief. "And you believed her, after getting to know Beau?" Put that way, it did seem strange that Hannah had taken Vivian's word so easily, but the evidence had seemed overwhelming. She said Beau owes her family money. "That he'll lose the farm if he doesn't agree to their terms," Hannah added. At this, Mrs. Potts's expression changed. "That part might be true," she admitted. "I know there was a loan years back, when Beau's mother was sick, but Beau would never sell out the farm, not even to save it. There's more to this story than Vivian's telling you." Hope flickered in Hannah's chest. "Then why hasn't he come to explain? It's been hours since their meeting." "He left," Mrs. Potts said. "Right after those business folks drove away, took his truck and headed toward town. I figured he just needed to clear his head, but..." She glanced at her watch. "It's not like him to be gone this long." Hannah's anger and hurt began to give way to worry. "Did he say anything before he left?" "Not to me, but I heard him arguing with Vivian. Something about reviewing the fine print and calling her father directly." Unease crept up Hannah's spine. "Mrs. Potts, what if something's wrong? What if he's in trouble?" The older woman's face mirrored her concern. "I've been thinking the same thing. It's been nearly 6 hours." Hannah made a decision. "I'm going to look for him." "Where will you start?" "I don't know," Hannah admitted. "But I can't just leave without making sure he's okay." Mrs. Potts smiled approvingly. "That's the spirit, and I know just who might help us." 20 minutes later, Hannah was knocking on the door of a small house on the outskirts of town. Sam, Jenkins, Beau's oldest friend and the local mechanic, greeted them with surprise. "Mrs. Potts, what brings you here at this hour?" "Beau's missing," Mrs. Potts said without preamble. "This is Hannah Bell. She works at the farm. We're worried something might have happened to him." Sam's friendly expression turned serious. "Missing? How?" "He left the farm this morning after a meeting with Vivian and some investors," Hannah explained. "He hasn't come back and he's not answering his phone." "Vivian's back?" Sam's frown deepened. "That's never good news. Come in, both of you." He ushered them into a comfortable living room. "When did you last see him exactly?" "Around 10 this morning," Mrs. Potts replied. "He was arguing with Vivian about some contracts." Sam nodded grimly. "He called me around 11, said he needed to look at some old financial records he'd stored in my garage. Wanted to check the original terms of a loan." "Carter's loan," Mrs. Potts confirmed. "That's what I figured." Sam ran a hand over his balding head. "He came by, spent about an hour going through the files, then said he was heading to Asheville to see Richard Carter directly." "Vivian's father?" Hannah asked. "The same," Sam replied. "Nasty piece of work. Been trying to get his hands on Larkspur Hollow for years. The farm sits on land his grandfather used to own before the Great Depression. He's had a grudge about it ever since." Hannah's worry increased. "So Beau went to confront him about the loan?" "That'd be my guess. He seemed pretty fired up, said something about a clause in the original agreement that Vivian had left out of the new contracts. Do you think Mr. Carter would..." Hannah couldn't finish the thought. Sam shook his head quickly. "Richard's ruthless in business, but he wouldn't harm Beau physically. More likely they're still arguing over terms, or maybe Beau's truck broke down on the mountain roads." Hannah checked her watch. "Asheville's what, an hour away? He should have been back by now, even with a long meeting." "That's assuming he got there at all," Mrs. Potts said quietly. The three exchanged worried glances. "I'll drive the route to Asheville," Sam decided. Check if his truck is on the side of the road somewhere. I'll go with you, Hannah said immediately. Sam nodded, grabbing his keys. Mrs. Potts, can you stay at the farm in case he comes back? And keep an eye on Vivian. Don't let her know we're looking for him. With pleasure, the older woman said grimly. That woman won't get a thing out of me. The narrow mountain roads were dark and winding. Sam drove carefully, keeping his high beams on, both of them scanning the shoulders for any sign of Beau's distinctive blue pickup. So, Sam said after they'd been driving for some time, you work with the chickens? Yes, Hannah replied. Though, I guess that job might not exist much longer if Vivian has her way. Don't count on that, Sam said with surprising confidence. Beau won't let her win, not this time. You sound sure. I've known Beau since we were kids, Sam explained. After his dad died, he practically lived at my house. He doesn't give up on things that matter to him. The farm matters to him, Hannah agreed. He built it from nothing. Sam glanced at her. Not just the farm. A knowing smile crossed his face. Mrs. Potts has been keeping me updated. Says you two have gotten close. Hannah felt her cheeks warm. We work together, that's all. Uh-huh, Sam replied, unconvinced. And that's why you're out here in the middle of the night looking for him, instead of believing whatever lies Vivian told you. Before Hannah could respond, Sam suddenly slowed the truck. Look there, he said, pointing to the shoulder ahead. Those are skid marks. He pulled over, switching on a powerful flashlight. The beam revealed long, dark marks on the pavement leading toward the guardrail. Beyond it was a steep embankment. Hannah's heart pounded as they got out to investigate. The guardrail was dented with patches of blue paint visible on the damaged metal. Beau's truck is blue, she whispered, her voice tight with fear. Sam was already shining his light down the embankment. About 30 feet down, partially hidden by brush, was Beau's pickup. Its front end crumpled against a tree. Beau? Hannah shouted, already scrambling toward the steep path. Be careful, Sam called, following close behind. The hillside was treacherous, loose gravel giving way under their feet. Hannah slipped several times but kept going, focused only on reaching the truck. As they got closer, she could see that the driver's side door was open. The cab was empty. He's not here, she called to Sam, relief and fresh worry warring in her chest. Sam reached the truck, examining it closely. He hit something in the road, he observed, pointing to the damaged front tire. Blew out the tire. Lost control, but he walked away from it. How can you tell? First aid kit's been opened, Sam pointed to the glove compartment. And there's blood on the steering wheel, but not much. Looks like he patched himself up and started walking. Which way would he go, back to the farm? Sam considered. No, he'd keep going to Asheville. It's closer from here, and there's a gas station about 2 miles ahead. He'd go there to call for help. He swung the flashlight beam up the hill. Question is, could he climb back up to the road with an injury? Hannah studied the embankment. It was steep, but not impossible. There, she pointed to an area where the brush was disturbed. I think he went that way. They made their way back up to the road, then began walking in the direction of Asheville. The night was quiet, except for the sound of crickets and their own footsteps on the pavement. After about a mile, headlights appeared behind them. A pickup truck slowed as it approached. You folks need help, an elderly man called from the driver's window. We're looking for our friend, Sam explained. His truck went off the road a ways back. Tall guy, beard, probably injured. The man nodded. Saw him about an hour ago walking along the road. Offered him a ride, but he said he was fine, just needed to get to Miller's gas up ahead. Stubborn fellow. Hope surged in Hannah's chest. That sounds like Beau, thank you. The man insisted on giving them a ride to the gas station, which turned out to be a small convenience store with a single pump. Outside, the teenage clerk confirmed that Beau had been there. Yeah, he came in all scraped up, asked to use the phone, made a call, bought some water and painkillers, then left. Left how? Sam asked. Did someone pick him up? Don't think so, the clerk said. He asked about a motel, so I told him about Ridgeview down the road. That's all I know. The Ridge. View Motel was a modest establishment about half a mile from the gas station. The night manager didn't hesitate to confirm that Beau had checked in. Room 12, he said, pointing down the row of doors. Arrived a couple hours ago. Looked pretty banged up, but refused when I offered to call a doctor. Hannah and Sam exchanged relieved glances. Thank you, Hannah said. already moving toward room 12. She knocked softly, then louder when there was no response. "Bo, it's Hannah. And Sam, we were worried about you." After a moment, the door opened. Bo stood there, his face pale beneath his beard, a bandage above his right eye and another on his forearm. He stared at them in genuine surprise. "What are you doing here?" "Looking for you," Hannah said, fighting the urge to throw her arms around him. "You disappeared. We thought something terrible had happened." Bo's expression softened. "I'm okay. Just a little banged up." He stepped back, inviting them in. The motel room was small and dated, but clean. Papers were spread across the bed, legal documents from the look of them. "Your truck's at the bottom of a hill," Sam said, examining his friend critically. "Should you be seeing a doctor?" Bo shook his head. "Just cuts and bruises, nothing serious." His eyes moved to Hannah, filled with questions. "Mrs. Potts said you were leaving." Hannah looked down, embarrassed. "Vivian told me about the contracts, said you'd agreed to the expansion, that my job would be eliminated." "And you believed her?" Bo said quietly. "I didn't want to," Hannah admitted, "but she seemed so sure, and you weren't there to tell me otherwise." Sam cleared his throat. "I'll go call Mrs. Potts. Let her know you're alive. Give you two a minute." He stepped outside, closing the door behind him. In the awkward silence that followed, Hannah noticed how tired Bo looked. Beyond the visible injuries, there was a weariness in his eyes that tugged at her heart. "Why didn't you tell me about the loan?" she asked gently. "About potentially losing the farm?" Bo sighed, gesturing for her to sit in the room's single chair while he perched carefully on the edge of the bed. "I didn't want to burden you with my problems," he said. "And honestly, I thought I had it under control until Vivian showed up. With those investors, what happened today with the contracts?" "Vivian thought she had me cornered," Bo explained, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "She brought the investors, the contracts, everything ready to sign. But she made a mistake." "What mistake?" "She altered the terms of the original loan agreement in the new contracts. She didn't think I'd notice or that I'd kept copies of the original documents." He gestured to the papers on the bed. "When I confronted her, she claimed it was a simple misunderstanding." "Did you sign anything?" Hannah asked, holding her breath. "A preliminary letter of intent, nothing legally binding. But I needed to check the original terms to be sure. That's why I went to Sam's, then headed to Asheville to confront Richard Carter directly." "Did you see him?" Bo shook his head. "Never made it that far. Blew a tire on a sharp curve, went off the road. By the time I got to the gas station and called Carter's office, he'd left for the day." "So what happens now?" Bo leaned forward, wincing slightly at the movement. "Now I have leverage. The original loan agreement had a clause about predatory refinancing. If I can prove Vivian and her father tried to change the terms deceptively, I can challenge the entire debt." Hope bloomed in Hannah's chest. "You could save the farm." "Maybe," Bo said cautiously. "It's a legal battle I might not win. But it gives me time and options." He reached out hesitantly, taking her hand. "What I need to know is, are you really leaving?" The warmth of his touch sent tingles up Hannah's arm. "I thought there wouldn't be a place for me anymore," she admitted. "Not with Vivian back in your life and the farm changing." "Vivian is not back in my life," Bo said firmly. "And the farm isn't changing. Not in the way she wants, anyway." Their eyes met and Hannah could see the sincerity in his. "I believe you," she said softly. "Good." His fingers tightened around hers. "Because I need you to believe something else too. When I said I'd rather be feeding chickens with you than sitting in boardrooms, I meant it. More than you know." Hannah's heart raced. "Bo, A sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Sam poked his head in. "Sorry to break up the moment, but we have a problem. Mrs. Potts just called. Vivian's been going through Bo's office and she found the file with his backup documents." Bo stood quickly, ignoring the pain it clearly caused him. "We need to get back to the farm now." "My car's still there," Hannah reminded him. "I can drive us back in it." "I'll handle your truck tomorrow," Sam assured Bo. "Let's go." The drive back to Larkspur Hollow was tense and quiet. Bo sat in the passenger seat of Hannah's car, occasionally giving directions for shortcuts along the mountain roads. His face was set in grim determination, his body tense with barely contained anger. "What will you do when we get there?" Hannah finally asked. Confront Vivian, Beau replied. End this once and for all. She'll just deny taking anything. Let her try. There was a cold certainty in his voice that Hannah hadn't heard before. I've let Vivian manipulate me for years because of guilt and obligation. That ends tonight. As they rounded the last curve before the farm's entrance, Hannah gasped. The driveway was illuminated by the headlights of Vivian's sports car, its trunk open as she loaded suitcases into it. She's leaving, Hannah observed. With my documents, most likely, Beau said grimly. Pull in behind her. Don't let her leave, Hannah did as he asked, blocking the sports car's exit. They got out just as Vivian slammed the trunk closed. She froze when she saw them, her perfect composure slipping for an instant before her face arranged itself into a smile. Beau, thank goodness. You're all right, I've been so worried. She moved toward him, arms outstretched. Beau stepped back. Save it, Vivian, where are my files? Vivian's smile faltered. Files? I don't know what you're... Mrs. Potts saw you in my office, Beau cut her off. The loan documents, the original agreement with your father. Where are they? I was just tidying. Up, Vivian said smoothly. After you left so abruptly, I was concerned. Stop lying. Beau's voice was quiet but hard as steel. It's over, Vivian. I know what you and your father tried to do. Vivian's facade cracked, her smile turning to a sneer. What we tried to do? We tried to save you from yourself, Beau. This farm, this life you've chosen. It's so beneath you. We had plans, remember? Plans for something much bigger than feeding chickens and selling organic vegetables at farmers' markets. For your plans, Beau corrected. Never mine. You could have had everything, Vivian hissed, glancing contemptuously at Hannah. Instead, you choose this ordinary life with some waitress who doesn't even know who you really are. That's where you're wrong, Beau said quietly. Hannah sees exactly who I am, who I want to be. That's something you never did. Vivian's face hardened. Fine, throw away your potential, but the debt still stands. My father will call it due next month, and then you'll lose everything anyway. Maybe, Beau conceded, or maybe I'll fight it in court. Either way, that's my problem to solve, not yours. The files are in my suitcase, Vivian said suddenly, her voice cold. Take them, they won't help you. Daddy has the originals. No, he doesn't, Beau replied. The originals are in my lawyer's safe in Asheville, have been for years. Shock registered on Vivian's perfect features. You're bluffing. Try me, Beau challenged. Or better yet, tell your father to try me. I've got nothing left to lose, Vivian. The standoff stretched for several heartbeats before Vivian moved to the trunk, opened it and pulled out a folder. She thrust it at Beau. This isn't over, she warned. Yes, it is, Beau replied firmly. Now get off my property and don't come back. Vivian's gaze shifted to Hannah, her eyes narrowing. You think you've won something here? Good luck with him. He'll never let you in, not really. He doesn't know how. Hannah met her stare evenly. I'm not trying to win anything. And Beau's not a prize to be claimed. Something like grudging respect flickered across Vivian's face before she turned away. Move your car, she said coldly. I'm leaving. Hannah did so, and they watched in silence as Vivian's sports car roared down the driveway and disappeared into the night. In the sudden quiet, Beau turned to Hannah, his expression softening. I'm sorry you had to see all that. Don't be, Hannah replied. I'm glad I did. Now I understand. They walked slowly back toward the main house, where Mrs. Potts waited anxiously on the porch. After assuring her that everything was all right, Beau asked for a moment alone with Hannah. They ended up in the garden behind the house, sitting on a stone bench beneath an old oak tree. The night was clear, stars spread like diamond dust across the sky. Did you mean what you said to Vivian? Hannah asked after a comfortable silence. About having nothing left to lose? Beau considered her question. I might lose the farm, he admitted. The debt is real and substantial. Without Vivian's investors, I'll have to find another way to pay it or refinance it. That must be terrifying, Hannah said softly. This place is your whole life. Beau turned to her, his eyes reflecting the starlight. It was, he agreed. Until... recently. Hannah's breath caught at the implication. Beau, I don't know what's going to happen, he said honestly, but I know that whatever comes next, I want you to be part of it, if you want that too. Hannah thought about the packed suitcase sitting in her cottage, about the uncertainty that had shadowed her since her divorce. She thought about how, in just a few short weeks, feeding chickens with Bo had come to mean more to her than years spent elsewhere. "I want that," she whispered. Bo's hand found hers in the darkness, their fingers intertwining like a promise. "Then we'll figure it out, together." As they sat beneath the stars, the future still uncertain but no longer facing it alone, Hannah realized something Vivian would never understand. Some treasures couldn't be measured in dollars or business deals. Some were found in simpler things, in hands held beneath starlight, in promises made and kept, in the quiet courage to begin again. And as Bo's arm slipped around her shoulders, pulling her close, Hannah knew that whatever challenges came, next they would face them the same way they'd faced the dawn, together, with the chickens waiting and a new day full of possibilities ahead. The weeks following Vivian's dramatic departure brought both challenges and unexpected gifts to Larkspur Hollow. The morning after the confrontation, Bo met with his lawyer in Asheville. The news wasn't ideal. While the original loan documents might give them leverage, Richard Carter was a powerful man with a team of attorneys at his disposal. "It'll be a fight," Bo told Hannah that evening as they sat on her cottage porch. "My lawyer thinks we have a case, but it could take months, even years, and there's no guarantee we'll win." "What happens in the meantime?" Hannah asked, pouring them both tea from a chipped blue pot. "The debt comes due next month," Bo replied. "My lawyer is trying to get an injunction to prevent Carter from foreclosing while we challenge the terms, but I need a backup plan." Hannah nodded, trying to appear calmer than she felt. In the short time she'd been at Larkspur Hollow, the place had become home in a way nowhere else ever had. The thought of Bo losing it all was unbearable. "What kind of backup plan?" she asked. Bo took a deep breath. "I might need to sell part of the property. The south pasture could fetch enough to cover the debt." Hannah knew how much that land meant to him. "But you love that pasture. You said it has the best view of the sunrise." "I love this whole place," Bo said simply, "but sometimes you have to sacrifice a part to save the whole." His words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning beyond just the land. As May turned to June, life at Larkspur Hollow settled into a new routine. Bo's injuries from the accident healed, leaving only a small scar above his right eye. Hannah's role expanded beyond just chicken care. She now helped with the farm stand on weekends and had taken over managing the small herb garden near the kitchen. Their relationship evolved too, in small but significant ways. Coffee in the fee. Morning became breakfast together. Evenings often found them on the porch of either the main house or Hannah's cottage, talking until the fireflies came out. Sometimes they worked side by side in comfortable silence. Other times they debated everything from books to farming methods with surprising passion. They hadn't put a name to what was growing between them, nor rushed its natural progression. Both carried wounds from the past that made them cautious. But there was a trust, a connection that deepened with each passing day. One warm Sunday evening, Bo invited Hannah to join him on a special errand. They drove to a small cemetery on the edge of town, where Bo placed fresh wildflowers on a well-tended grave. "My mother," he explained simply. "I come every Sunday." Hannah stood respectfully nearby as Bo spoke softly to the headstone, telling his mother about the week's events at the farm. When he mentioned Hannah's name, she felt a strange mix of honor and shyness, as if being formally introduced to someone important. As they walked back to the truck, Bo took her hand. "She would have liked you," he said quietly. "How can you be sure?" Hannah asked. His smile was gentle. She valued honesty above all else, said you could always tell a person's character by how they handled animals and difficult mornings. "You excel at both." Hannah squeezed his hand, deeply touched by the simple compliment. On the drive back, Bo seemed lost in thought. Finally, he said, "I never told you how my mother died. You don't have to." "I want to," he interrupted gently. "The cancer came quickly. One day she was fine. The next..." He swallowed hard. "The treatments were experimental, expensive. Insurance wouldn't cover them. I was just starting Larkspur then, barely breaking even." "That's when you borrowed from Vivian's father," Hannah guessed. Bo nodded. Richard Carter had been trying to buy this land for years. When he heard about my situation, he offered what seemed like a miracle, a private loan with reasonable terms. I was desperate enough not to question why he'd suddenly become so generous. "You were trying to save your mother," Hannah said softly. "Anyone would have done the same." "Maybe," Bo conceded, "but the treatments didn't work. Mom died 6 months later, and I was left with a massive debt and a grief I couldn't see past." His fingers tightened on the steering wheel. "That's when Vivian appeared, offering comfort, partnership, a vision for the future. I was vulnerable." Hannah could imagine it all too well. Bo, younger and devastated by loss, turning to someone who seemed to offer a way forward. "When did you realize it wasn't right?" she asked. "Over time," Bo replied. Vivian's vision for Larkspur was always bigger, shinier, more commercial than mine. She saw the farm as a stepping stone to something else. "I just wanted to honor what my parents had started here, create something sustainable and true." I pulled into the driveway of Larkspur Hollow, the farmhouse silhouetted against the sunset. Bo parked but made no move to get out. "Breaking our engagement was the hardest decision I'd ever made," he continued. "Not because I still loved her, but because I knew her father would retaliate. And he did. Changed the loan terms, called in favors to blacklist me with other lenders." "That's horrible," Hannah said, anger rising on Bo's behalf. "It taught me something important," Bo said, turning to face her in the fading light. "There are some compromises that cost too much, even if they seem easier in the moment. Some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are against you." His eyes held hers, and Hannah knew he wasn't just talking about the farm anymore. 2 days later, Hannah was weeding the herb garden when Mrs. Potts hurried out from the main house. "There's a call for you," she said, sounding puzzled. "From a law office in Asheville." Hannah frowned, wiping her hands on her jeans as she followed Mrs. Potts inside. She couldn't imagine why a lawyer would be calling her. The conversation was brief, but bewildering. When she hung up, Hannah stood, motionless by the phone, trying to make sense of what she'd heard. "Everything all right, dear?" Mrs. Potts asked anxiously. "I'm not sure," Hannah replied honestly. "They want me to come to Asheville tomorrow. Something about a document that might interest me." "What document?" "They wouldn't say, just that it concerned this property and my family." Mrs. Potts's eyebrows shot up. "Your family? Do you have relatives who lived in the area?" "Not that I know of," Hannah said, still confused. "My parents moved around a lot when I was young. I don't remember much before we settled in Ohio when I was about 8. "Curious," Mrs. Potts mused. "Will you go?" Hannah nodded slowly. "I think I have to. They seemed to think it was important." She found Bo in the barn repairing a piece of equipment. His face registered concern when she relayed the strange call. "Want me to go with you?" he offered immediately. Hannah hesitated. "Don't you have that meeting with the bank tomorrow about refinancing?" "It can wait," Bo said firmly. "No," Hannah decided. "That meeting is too important. I'll be fine on my own. It's probably nothing, maybe some distant relative I never knew about owned land nearby." Bo didn't look convinced but respected her decision. "Call me as soon as you're done," he insisted, "and be careful." The law office was housed in a historic building in downtown Asheville. Hannah, dressed in the nicest clothes she owned, which still felt inadequate for the imposing surroundings, gave her name to the receptionist and was promptly led to a conference room. A middle-aged woman in a crisp suit introduced herself as Patricia Winters, attorney at law. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Bell," she said, gesturing for Hannah to sit. "I apologize for the mystery, but I needed to verify your identity before sharing this information." She opened a folder and removed an old, yellowed envelope. "This was left in our firm's care 30 years ago, with instructions to locate you when possible and deliver it upon your 35th birthday, which I understand was last month." Hannah stared at the envelope in confusion. "Who left it?" "A woman named Eleanor Bell," Patricia replied. "Your grandmother, I believe." "My father's mother," Hannah confirmed, surprised. "She died when I was very young. I barely remember her." The envelope contains a letter and some legal documents," Patricia explained. She was quite specific that you receive them personally, not through any other family member. Hannah accepted the envelope with trembling hands. Her name was written on it in elegant script. "I'll give you some privacy," Patricia said, standing. "Take all the time you need." When the door closed behind the lawyer, Hannah carefully opened the sealed envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and several official-looking documents. "My dearest Hannah," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then I am long gone, but you have reached your 35th year. I chose this age because it is when I believe you will be mature enough to understand the weight of what I'm entrusting to you, yet young enough to benefit from it fully. There is so much I wish I could tell you in person, but circumstances have made that impossible. Your grandfather and I made choices that affected your father's life, and by extension yours. Some of those choices I regret deeply. What I do not regret is the steps I've taken to make amends. Enclosed you will find the deed to a parcel of land in North Carolina, 20 acres that border what is now called Larkspur Hollow. This land was part of a larger property that belonged to your grandfather's family for generations, until hard times forced most of it to be sold. The 20 acres I've held in trust for you were my personal inheritance, separate from what was lost. I've arranged for the property taxes to be paid from a special account until your 35th birthday, at which point the land and any remaining funds transfer fully to you. It is my deepest hope that this legacy brings you joy, perhaps roots in a place your ancestors once called home. The land has a small creek running through a meadow with old-growth forest beyond. It was always my favorite spot to sit and think. My only request is that you visit the land before making any decisions about its future. Walk its boundaries, feel its history. Then choose what feels right for you. With all my love and hope for your future, Grandma Eleanor Hannah read the letter twice more, tears blurring her vision. She remembered very little about her grandmother, just a vague impression of a stern but kind woman who always smelled of lavender. The accompanying documents confirmed everything in the letter. There was indeed a deed to 20 acres bordering Larkspur Hollow, now legally Hannah's. A bank statement showed a modest sum remaining in the trust account, also now transferred to her name. But it was a faded photograph at the bottom of the envelope that truly took her breath away. It showed a young couple with a small child standing in front of a familiar landscape, rolling hills that Hannah recognized as visible from Beau's south pasture. Written on the back in the same elegant script, "Thomas, Eleanor and baby James, your father, at the Bell Home Place, 1965. Hannah's hands shook. She'd been living next to land that once belonged to her family without knowing it. Land that, according to these documents, now belonged to her. The drive back to Larkspur Hollow was a blur of emotions and questions. Hannah called Beau from the road, asking him to meet her at her cottage but offering no explanation. She needed to see his face when she told him. He was waiting on her porch when she arrived, pacing anxiously. "What happened?" he asked as she stepped from the car. "You sounded strange on the phone." Hannah wordlessly handed him the envelope with its contents. She watched as confusion, surprise, and finally understanding crossed his face as he read. "The south pasture," he said, softly looking up from the papers. "Your grandmother's land borders the south pasture." Hannah nodded, still processing it herself. "Apparently my father grew up around here, at least for a while. I had no idea." "This is incredible," Beau said, examining the deed again. "This property... Hannah, do you realize what this means? That I own land next to yours?" Beau laughed, a sound of pure joy that Hannah rarely heard from him. "Not just any land. This property has the natural spring that feeds the creek running through my south pasture. It's incredibly valuable, especially to Larkspur Hollow." Hannah's eyes widened as she began to understand. "Is it valuable enough to help with the debt?" Beau's expression turned serious. "More than enough if you were willing to sell it." "But Hannah, this is your inheritance. I would never ask you to..." "What if I don't want to sell it?" Hannah interrupted, an idea forming. "What if there was another way?" 1 month later, Hannah stood beside Beau on a ridge overlooking both properties. The lawyer had just left after finalizing the paperwork for their new partnership. Hannah's land would remain hers, but they had created a conservation easement that protected the spring and allowed both properties to benefit from it. More importantly, the bank had accepted the combined properties as collateral for a new loan that paid off Carter's debt entirely. "I still can't believe this worked," Hannah said, watching the sunset paint the hills in gold and crimson. "I can," Beau replied, his arm around her waist. "Your grandmother must have been an extraordinary woman to have planned this so carefully." "I wish I'd known her better," Hannah said wistfully, "known any of this history." "Maybe that's why you felt drawn here," Beau suggested. "Maybe some part of you remembered." Hannah leaned against him, savoring the solid warmth of his presence. So much had changed in the past few months. When she'd arrived at Larkspur Hollow, she'd been seeking only safety and stability. Instead, she'd found connection, purpose, and a sense of belonging she'd never experienced before. "I have something for you," Beau said, reaching into his pocket. "Not exactly a housewarming gift, since you already have a house, but..." He pulled out a small silver key attached to a hand-carved wooden tag. Hannah took it, examining the fine detail of the carving, a perfect miniature of a chicken that looked suspiciously like Duchess. "What's this for?" she asked, running her finger over the smooth wood. "The old greenhouse," Beau explained. "You mentioned wanting to restore it, maybe grow herbs and flowers year-round." Hannah remembered the casual comment she'd made weeks ago while they were walking the property. The fact that he'd not only remembered, but had taken it seriously, touched her deeply. "I had Sam repair the structural issues," Beau continued. "The rest is for you to decide. If you want to, that is." Hannah looked at the key, then up at Beau. In his eyes, she saw the same question that had been in his words at the motel, an invitation to something lasting, something they would build together. "Let's grow something together," she said softly, echoing the words engraved on the wooden. Tagbo's smile was like sunrise breaking across his face. He drew her closer, and when his lips finally met hers, Hannah felt like she'd found the answer to a question she'd been asking her whole life. The kiss deepened, tender yet filled with promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "I've wanted to do that for a very long time," Beau admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "What took you so long?" Hannah teased, her hands still resting on his chest. "I needed to be sure," he said simply, "that this was real, that you'd stay." "I'm staying," Hannah promised, the words feeling like a vow. "This is home now." As they walked hand in hand back toward the farmhouse, Hannah thought about the strange twists of fate that had brought her here, the lost job that had sent her, searching, the wrinkled resume and late arrival that should have disqualified her, the connection to this land that had been waiting for her, unknown, for decades. "What are you thinking?" Beau asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "That some things are meant to be," Hannah replied, "even when they seem impossible at first." Later that week, a small package arrived for Hannah. There was no return address, just her name written in an unfamiliar hand. Inside was a worn envelope and a brief note from an attorney in Ohio, Ms. Bell. "This was found among your father's possessions after his passing last year. It took some time to locate you, as you had moved several times. The executor thought you should have it." Hannah opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a faded photograph of a little girl, herself at about 5 years old, sitting on a fence. Behind her was a vista that Hannah now recognized instantly. The rolling hills of Larkspur Hollow, viewed from what was now her own property. Turning the photo over, she found her father's handwriting. "Hannah at Grandma Eleanor's, North Carolina, 1995, her happy place." Tears filled Hannah's eyes. She had been here before, had loved this place before, and somehow life had brought her back. When she showed the photo to Beau, he wrapped her in his arms without a word, understanding the magnitude of the discovery. They stood together on the porch, watching as evening settled over the land they both loved, land that had called Hannah home across time and memory. In the chicken coop nearby, Duchess clucked contentedly, settling her feathers for the night. In the newly restored greenhouse, seedlings pushed toward the light. In the fields, crops grew under careful tending. And in the space between two hearts that had found each other against all odds, something else was growing. Something as sturdy as the mountains that surrounded them, and as delicate as the first green shoot of spring. Some called it love, some called it destiny. Hannah and Beau simply called it home. 6 months later, Hannah stood in the farmhouse kitchen, arranging freshly cut flowers from her greenhouse. The herb business she'd started was thriving, with local restaurants now, placing regular orders for her specialized varieties. Beau entered, wrapping his arms around her from behind and placing a kiss on her neck. "Ready for our guests?" Hannah nodded, leaning back against him. "Sam and Mrs. Potts should be here any minute. The pie is cooling and the roast has another hour." It was their first official dinner party as a couple. Though everyone already knew, they were together. It was impossible to keep secrets in a small town. Tonight felt different. Special. As Beau set the table, Hannah caught herself watching him, marveling at how much had changed. The gruff, closed-off man she'd met that first day had gradually opened up, like one of her more stubborn flowers. He still had his quiet moments, still rose before dawn to check the animals, still visited his mother's grave every Sunday, now with Hannah beside him. But there was a lightness to him that hadn't been there before, a readiness to laugh that made her heart swell. The legal battle with Richard Carter was ongoing, but without the immediate threat of foreclosure, they could face it together without fear. Larkspur Hollow was thriving, the partnership between their properties creating new opportunities they were just beginning to explore. And in the small velvet box hidden in Beau's desk drawer, the one Hannah had accidentally discovered last week while looking for a pencil, was a vintage ring that suggested even more changes were on the horizon. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. As Beau went to answer it, Hannah took a deep breath, savoring the moment. She had come to Larkspur Hollow looking for stability, not fairy tales. What she'd found was something far better than either. A love built on truth, strengthened by challenges, and rooted in the very land beneath their feet. Outside, the chickens clucked in their coop, the fields stretched toward the mountains, and the greenhouse glass caught the last golden rays of sunlight. Inside, laughter and conversation began to fill the rooms as their friends arrived. And in the center of it all stood Hannah and Beau, their separate stories now woven into one, as natural and right as feathers and forever. The end.